Today's podcast is sponsored by Badibro. Badibro are a sportswear company based in County Wexford. Be sure to check out their website and social media accounts, and I will leave the links to them in the video description. So Patrick, thanks very much for coming on. I suppose like everywhere in the world, we were all in lockdown for 2-3 months. Before we get into the football, how did you find it all? I suppose no football on television or even to go to games.
Yeah, weird. Like everyone, we had a few weeks where sort of Sky was in a bit of a state of flux, and we were all trying to work out what we were going to do. And there were obviously meetings going on at a much higher level than I'm at. So for those few weeks, I was homeschooling, and it was daddy daycare and stuff like that. Then they started to put together the football show, which I ended up doing the paper review on quite a bit. So that was evenings reading through papers, and I was getting up at 5:45. So that was kind of good and bad, because it was, although it wasn't like a long working day, I was working at the worst bits of the day. I'd work from like 8 in the evening till 10 at night, and then I'd get up at 5:45 and go through the papers again. But I felt really on top of it. I felt really involved. There was definitely a few weeks where, especially listening to Gary Neville, you sort of thought, oh no, this is really not gonna happen. Yeah. And then it was almost like, I don't know if you felt the same. It was really, all of a sudden, it clicked into place. The Bundesliga started happening, and it was pretty successful. The testing started happening, and there were very few positive tests. And then we got to the point we're at today. So, and I feel, although it sounds odd, but I didn't realise probably quite what a difference a crowd made. It's if we ever took them for granted, then I don't think we ever will again. But in the last couple of games, I think West Ham, Chelsea, I thought Chelsea City was a really good game. I was at Sheffield United, Tottenham last night, and that was a good match. So I think maybe as players get a bit fitter and they get maybe a bit more used to how odd it is with no one inside the stadium, then I think the football is improving, and there's still quite a bit on. At the bottom of the table, Champions League. So your boys have tied up the league, obviously. So it's still a bit to play for.
Well, that asterisk that Gary Neville likes to talk about a lot as well.
What do you think about that? What do you think about Gary as a pundit?
To be honest, when he first joined Sky, I said, oh, sure, here we go, is the bias. But to be fair to him, he's actually been the complete opposite. And if anything, he's as honest as they'll come. I think Jurgen Klopp had a go, and during this football show, he's had things to say on everything. Yeah. But no, and I think it's the same for Jamie as well, that they're actually probably more harsh on their own team, rather than being biased that people probably thought they might be.
Yeah, no, I thought it was a really good example of that a couple of weeks ago when Tottenham played Man United, and I could see just on Twitter that Sky were getting a lot of hammer for having, which was unusual, but it was Ever and Keane were the guests, and there was a few Tottenham fans saying, oh, why is there no Tottenham guests? But then, obviously, what people remember from that night is Keane hammering De Gea and Maguire. So often you do find that they are more harsher on the club that they love, because they get more animated about it, and also their comments are picked up more by the local paper or whatever it may be. So it doesn't always work out.
Yeah, well, that's it. But I think Sky probably have to take a lot of credit for actually keeping the likes of the football show going for whatever it was, 10, 11 weeks. Did you enjoy it? Obviously, you were doing a few interviews with players and managers. Did you even feel from watching myself, that they were actually maybe more honest than they've ever been?
Yeah, sometimes. At first, I remember when we were still trying to find our feet, I just took myself off, and I made a little feature on the very first Sky promo. I don't know, you're probably too young for it, Dara, but Alive and Kicking was the first Sky promo. And I went on and I managed to find Anders Limpar did something with us, Andy Ritchie did something with us. So I made a few bits like that I enjoyed. And then, then the club started putting up players. So there was, I'd say, like, I was doing 3 or 4 player interviews a week, which with little bits of prep, obviously you want to go in knowing what you're talking about and having a bit of an idea. So, it ended up being quite busy. And were they more honest? I think in times they were. I think a lot of it is And I do think players have improved, not just because of, you've seen guys like Rashford doing really big and impressive things, but I think they are a bit more media savvy. And I've only been doing it in the Premier League since 2012. I think guys are more confident and more comfortable. If you look back to, I did something last summer where I looked back at, I don't even remember the tournoi, just a little tournament, like a friendly tournament that England won just before France '98. And I watched back loads of interviews from that tournament.
Yeah.
Players, even like Gary Neville and like Shearer, guys who are pundits now and really bright guys, quite guarded with the media. I think they do. Players these days are better in interviews than they're given credit for. But yeah, maybe the fact of a lot of them were doing it sat in their living room, and maybe that did make them a little bit more maybe relaxed. And I always think a key thing in any interview, if people are relaxed, then they will be honest and they'll say interesting things. It's when it starts, because they walk into a room and it's not like radio or anything like that. There might be 3 or 4 cameras. There might be 5 or 6 of us from Sky. Most of the time, the guy's like 22, so you can understand why they'd maybe freeze a little bit. So I think when they relax, and obviously like on Zoom they do relax because they're at home and it's just they're looking at their laptop. So I think that might be a big part of it, Dara.
Yeah, and you probably maybe they're more trained nowadays, maybe with social media and that even the likes of Trent Alexander-Arnold, I've even found, how many interviews he's done the last 2 or 3 years. He just nearly says the right things the whole time. I don't know, is that coming from the club or older players that they're just seeming to know? Yeah, that's probably it.
He's the local lad in one of the best teams in the world. So I reckon if you, because I remember him being maybe a little bit nervy in his early interviews, but if you look, and I did him last time I spoke to him, I think it was before the City home game at Anfield. I think so. And I remember thinking then how much more confident he got. But you'd have to ask him how many interviews. But he'll be doing interviews every week. He'll be in really high demand now because he's, as I said, the local lad in a really good team.
Yeah.
Because of what a good footballer he is. And I think it happened. It felt like by the end of Steven Gerrard's career, he would be one maybe at the start you wouldn't have thought was a great talker. But by the end of his career, Gerrard was so honest, articulate. He became a really good interviewee, I think. So I think it's just, you got to cut people a bit of slack, really. It can be quite a nerve-wracking thing, and most guys, if they do it a lot, get better at it.
Yeah, so we'll move on. I suppose the restart is topical now. It's happening right now. I suppose what's it been like? Obviously, you're at the grounds and the protocols involved, and like how strict is the protocols in the stadium?
Yeah, pretty strict. So I'll talk you through a typical game for me now. I get a survey in the morning from Sky just to make sure I've not got any of the symptoms, haven't come into contact with anyone 14. But there's basically between 5 and 7 questions that you need to be ticking no to, really. Obviously, answer it honestly, but if you're ticking no to all that, you're fine. Then you get to the ground. At the moment now, so I would often, especially for Manchester and stuff like that, I'd get a train or I'd share. I actually only live 5 minutes from Alan Smith, so often I'd travel with him. I get on really well with him. But we're not allowed to travel together with anyone anymore. So I've basically got a hire car, which I've got for the next few weeks. And I have to drive by myself. Not really. I did stay one night over in Manchester, but we're not really supposed to stay overnight if we can avoid it as well. And then you get to the ground, just thinking back to the first game I did at Aston Villa against Sheffield United. You'll get there, you need to be on the list, which obviously should have been taken care of by Sky, get some accreditation. Then you go into another building, you have to fill out another survey for the club. You have to have your temperature check. And then there's one last check on the gate, and then you're in. And then within the ground, we're only allowed in amber because we're not one of the guys being tested every 3 days like the players and the press officers and stuff like that. So we're basically, whereas normally we'd be allowed in the tunnel where the interview room is, and you wouldn't say you're allowed free reign, but most clubs are fairly relaxed.
Yeah.
But now you're just literally allowed around the edges, and they're not. And the interviews, I find them a bit harder to do, actually, to just build neat chemistry, because I'm basically one side of the barrier holding my mic. I have to bring my own mic cube now to every game. I have to fit my own pack and everything. So we every game you're at, you have something called talkback. So you have an earpiece in, you can hear the programme, the commentators, producer, which can be a bit of a nightmare during an interview, because you might be hearing sometimes, if say you've done the player interview, I'm digressing a bit here, sorry, but say you've done the players and it happened during the advert break, so that might be not quite live, that might have happened a minute before you're seeing it on your telly at home. And then as that interview's actually going out to people at home, then say Pep Guardiola walks into the room or whoever, so then in your ear you can hear your own voice, your old interview, maybe someone talking to you, and the guy you're going to talk to. So it gets it can get pretty complicated. But anyway, so now on one side, and it's almost like they're giving a press conference a little bit. They're 2 meters away. They stay on the pitch, and the red zone is basically the tunnel and the pitch, and we're only allowed around the edges. So does that make sense?
Yeah, well, I mean, we're all watching it. As it said there, you're nearly, it's just a big distance away from the manager, and you might just get that much shot.
I just think it's harder to. I really think it's good. You know, you'll know yourself. Once an interview stops feeling like an interview and starts feeling like a chat, you feel better, and you just listen and react, and that's when hopefully it works well for everyone. But it's just quite hard to do it, because a lot of the clubs are trying to make the match they feel as normal as it can for players. So you'll start interviewing Mourinho, I was doing last night, and then halfway through it, all of a sudden the PA kicks in, the music goes on, you can't really hear him, the music's not for anyone, there's no one in the stadium. So you've got music, distance, all the other things I was telling you about in your ear, so it can just be quite hard to hear, as odd as that might sound.
Yeah, and then the matches themselves, like how surreal is it, just watching football with absolutely no one in the ground apart from maybe the media and obviously the press officers and the players?
Yeah, it is odd. I actually find it odd. It's really nice being for a normal game when the crowd's in. Say if I get there 4 hours before, and you might start doing little bits for Sky Sports News, and 2 or 3 hours before, and you might have a meet. We have a food bus, and you're going to have your breakfast and a chat, and a match day builds quite nicely. And obviously, without even looking at your clock, you can tell what you're getting towards, because people start coming in, and you can tell kickoff's not too far away. But in this scenario, you can be sat there and it'll feel like 3 or 4 hours before kickoff, and it's actually only half an hour until kickoff, because match day never builds. I almost found that the odder bit. The first couple of games I found really weird, and I thought they were well below what you'd normally expect from a Premier League game. But I do think because of maybe the players' fitness and because they've got a bit more used to it, I do think the last week or so it's been the football, in terms of the excitement and the standard's been a bit more like its old self.
Yeah, that's it. Like, do you think the players actually deserve credit? They're just building it up now. Even some players might actually enjoy it a bit more. I think even just one player, for example, probably Christian Pulisic now is just suddenly looking brilliant for Chelsea. I know he had the injury, but he just seems to be enjoying his football. Do you actually think the standard deserves more credit than his game, maybe?
Yeah, maybe. I think you've got to be honest about the fact there were a lot of dull games early on, and I don't think there's any harm in acknowledging that it wasn't as good as it normally would have been. But in terms of maybe a few players enjoying it more, I do remember on the football show actually during lockdown, I remember Jamie Redknapp saying some players would enjoy it more because there'd be less pressure. I don't think you can underestimate actually the effect, just thinking about it, seeing the games over the last few weeks, that a crowd has on a player. That's maybe why you get slightly duller games, players making slightly safer passes, because a crowd won't allow you to make the say, especially in England with the type of football that people tend to enjoy. You don't get away with that safe football, possession football, and I think with no one to shout at you and call you names, you're a bit more likely, and it's all, I'm sure, completely sort of unconscious, that you just make slightly safer decisions, I think. And then probably there are a few guys who maybe those ones who aren't fan favourites, who get it in the neck a little bit, who just play with a little bit more freedom. On a similar note, I don't know if you saw the Bournemouth-Newcastle game, I just don't think Bournemouth would have capitulated like that and fallen away. I don't think their crowd would have allowed them. And that's not to say they gave up. I just think, again, several thousand people shouting at you is going to be a bit of a motivation, isn't it? And it doesn't matter how much people learn or anything like that. I've never sort of really believed in that. I don't think that makes a difference. I just think people shouting at you has an impact.
Well, that's it. And I think even the Merseyside derby, Everton, they basically just camped back and let Liverpool have the ball. Now, I think if there was a full Goodison Park there, I think Everton would have felt the pressure to come out a bit more. But actually suits them with no crowd, that they could just play that and I know they had a few chances at the end, actually almost paid off for them.
Yeah, you might be right. I was thinking about that, and again, I've only seen highlights, or not that there were many, of the Merseyside derby, but I was at another game. Can't remember where I was now. So I didn't really see it, but I did do the Merseyside derby. I think in the last couple of years, it was 0-0 the year before, wasn't it?
I think it was the last 2 years before.
And then the year before that, did Mane score a late winner? Is that right?
No, I think the last 3 at Goodison have been 0-0, and Mane was the year before. Yeah.
Was it? So it's so. Yeah, they haven't been even with a crowd. The last few at Goodison weirdly haven't been great games, which was odd because but the one before that, the 3-3, which was a great game.
That is 2014, I think. Yeah. Sturridge got a last minute equaliser.
I remember I think my first one was a 2-2 at Goodison. That was the first Merseyside derby I went to, and that was a really good game as well. So. Yeah, I don't know. I can't really put my finger on why there haven't been good games at Goodison.
Yeah, but in terms of the league itself, obviously Liverpool won the league, and that was probably tied up maybe, say, December. I think it would be fair to say. In terms of, we'll just start with maybe the top 4 race. It seems like Leicester now have been dragged back into this race with Chelsea, United, and Wolves. Like, how do you see that playing out?
Oh, I don't know. I got a bit of a soft spot for Leicester, I've got to be honest, because I went to university there. So, and when I was at university there, it was the Martin O'Neill era. So we used to be able to get student discount, £10 a ticket. I went to it was Worthington Cup, I think then. Matt Elliott scored 2 to beat Tranmere in the final. So I was at that game. So I went to quite a few games. They were good then, Leicester. They always managed to dig out a result. I don't know. If you looked at it on form since the resumption, you wouldn't put any money on Leicester, would you? Let's be honest. Man United look totally different with Bruno Fernandes. Chelsea, I thought, had looked pretty good, but then obviously lost the West Ham game. I've missed Wolves. I haven't seen, because of the games I've been at, and I haven't been at Wolves, I haven't really seen them, but they're obviously, you can't discount them either. I'd probably, obviously Liverpool and Man City. I'd go Man United and Chelsea, I think, for the next 2 at the moment, because I think Man United have looked good. Chelsea have still got a slight edge, haven't they, in terms of points? I think that's really big for them, Chelsea. But one thing that comes with the investment they've made and the players they've got lined up to start next season makes it a really big deal, I think. For them to make Champions League. I don't know, and maybe that pressure will tell. It would be good to see Wolves or Leicester. And like I said, I've got a soft spot for Leicester, but form-wise, especially with Wolves playing well, Man United playing well, and Chelsea, squad-wise, probably having a bit more than Leicester. I don't know. Chelsea, Man United.
Yeah, do you see Chelsea or Man United? I mean, I know City were 20 points behind, but you still classify them as in that group of Liverpool. Do you see them breaking into that next season and maybe challenging?
Maybe. I mean, I remember Jamie Carragher saying on Sky a good few months ago now that you're never as far away as you think. I mean, who'd have thought that Liverpool would challenge for the title under Brendan Rodgers? And you remember at the start of that season, I think they'd finished the season before really well.
Yeah.
But also with Suarez, they caught fire. Obviously, Leicester you wouldn't have bet on. Man United don't suddenly look that far away. And it will be exciting to see Chelsea with Werner and Ziyech. So, and looks like they might add a few more as well. I don't know. I think the gap's probably too big to make up in one window. I mean, the gap between Liverpool to City this season as well, but Liverpool and City have been so much better that I'd be probably a little bit surprised if they made it up in one transfer window. But they do look like they're going to at least close the gap a little bit, I would say. Don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's probably. Well, I'm not worried about United or Chelsea. You see all the talk on Twitter the whole time, and you swear that United are completely back now. But I think it's that consistency level that City and Liverpool have said the last 3 years that you can only probably lose 2 games maximum, and you have to get probably 95 plus points. That's the standards for now. And can United or Chelsea get that sort of points total next year? I don't think so. I just don't think so yet. But they have the money, and that will, get them back, because Liverpool don't look like they're investing anything, and that would probably worry me a bit, maybe long term rather than short term.
Yeah, and you never know though, do you? Who would have thought suddenly after barely losing the game for 2 seasons that City would lose 8 this season? All of a sudden you've got obviously Sane's gone, Silva's going, Company's gone and not been replaced yet. So that suddenly, although they were fantastic against Liverpool the other night, Man City have got some work to do. Even though they totally outplayed Newcastle the other day, but they still had the White Gale chance that could have completely let Newcastle back in the game. And I think at the moment they are giving teams a chance, Man City, and that's the evidence for that is that they've lost 8 games.
Yeah, that's exactly it. I suppose down the bottom, it's hard to see probably Norwich getting out of it, and then maybe Brighton are just above the 4 teams, maybe just enough of a gap. Maybe one more win will do for them. Then you have Watford, West Ham, Villa, and Bournemouth. With them 4, do you worry for probably Bournemouth more so than the other 3?
Oh, I'm really worried for Bournemouth. I did their game against Newcastle. Was it Wednesday night? And I just haven't seen Newcastle, because of the sort of team Newcastle have been for a few seasons. Newcastle have had some great wins, but they've been solid and organised, haven't they? But they absolutely tore Bournemouth apart, and they just look devoid of confidence. They look a little bit like they've lost their way. And Bournemouth have got a really hard run of games to come as well. So you can't, basing it on that one game, because I hadn't seen the Palace game or the Wolves game. You just couldn't make a case on the back of that Newcastle game for Bournemouth staying up. Norwich probably too far. West Ham after the win the other day probably look all right. Brighton maybe a little bit too much of a gap, because of the type of football we're seeing since resumption. I can't see anyone. I think the total that will keep you up will be lower than it would have been, I think. I think it's between Watford and Villa. I think the other 2 will go. I think West Ham and Brighton will be okay. Not sure out of Watford and Villa. Villa looked pretty good. I've done them a couple of times. They should have, although there was obviously Sheffield United had the goal line technology issue and should have scored. Villa were the better team that night, and they were also, they could have got something against Chelsea. Villa, they were 1-0 up for they were certainly 1-0 up at half time. I can't remember when Chelsea got their goals. Got their goals close to the second half, I think. But Villa have sort of looked okay, and I've been probably slightly surprised that Watford haven't been better, because I did the game against Liverpool, which wasn't obviously too far before it all shut down, and they looked good. Watford, you wouldn't have thought they would go down, but they've just lost their way a little bit. They haven't resumed in the same form that they were in pre-lockdown, have they?
Yeah, yeah. You nearly think Watford and even West Ham, they're too good to be down there. Like Watford's some good players. You have Sarr on the wing, Deeney, Delafeu I think is injured, but you
Yeah.
probably would think Villa's problem is goals, and where they go. I think they have Liverpool and United and a few other hard ones to come. So it's hard to see where they'll get the points from.
Yeah, but like I said, I don't think anyone's gonna sort of suddenly rattle off 3 or 4 wins. It doesn't look like that at the moment.
Yeah.
Obviously, Villa have got Grealish. He probably hasn't been in absolute top gear since they came back. You're right. You do sort of think with them. They didn't score at Sheffield United. Courtney Hawes, who's a centre half, got their goal against Chelsea. El Mohammadi got their goal against Newcastle.
Yeah.
What was their other game? I can't remember.
Wolves.
Yeah,
They lost 1-0 to Wolves.
And they lost 1-0 against Wolves. So just 2 goals from defenders since they came back.
Yeah.
So, yeah. At risk of stating the obvious, if you're in Premier League games for teams like that, must be such hard work. Do you not think? When I mean, for Liverpool, for really good teams, not just Liverpool, but if you know you've got someone who can get you out of trouble, it must be easy to really dig in and defend, knowing that you've got a guy at the other end who can get you out of trouble. But if you can't score, it must just be such a nightmare for the defence. Such hard work.
You just look at Danny Ings at Southampton. He's got 18 goals, or whatever. He's just been so reliable this season, and he's been the difference for them this season.
Yeah, that's it, and that's why they're such big money. If a guy can even look, we're probably a bit quick, all of us on social media, and said, "Oh, he's no good" or whatever. But a guy who can score 10 Premier League goals a season is such a good footballer. I know Danny Ings has got a few more than that, but yeah, they're just. If you've got someone that good, you've got a really good chance of staying in the league. You'd have to go back through it, but I doubt there's many teams that have gone down from the Premier League with a really, really good goal scorer. Someone who can just nick a goal from nowhere. And that's why you worry. I worry for Watford and Villa actually, because I'm not sure there's a huge amount of goals in either team.
Yeah, I suppose a bit about yourself. How does the job at Sky come about? Obviously, you've been doing the Premier League for a good while, but was there a path to that you had to go on?
Yeah, so I said to you, didn't I? I went to Leicester University. I actually did a history degree, and my wife was doing on the same degree. So these are all her history. She's a history teacher. These are all her books behind me now. So I did that. Probably didn't have too much of an idea of what I wanted to do, but then after that, I stayed in Leicester and I did something called an NCTJ. Did like a journalism qualification, and then I started as a news reporter at the Northamptonshire Evening Telegraph, which I loved. There was a news reporter there for 2 or 3 years. Covered general election, things like that. Started doing a little bit of sport there. Covered. A couple of Kettering games, Corby Town, Rothwell Town, all the big guns, Dara.
Yeah, I know them all, yeah.
And then from there, I heard of a job that was going on Sky Sports News. You'd call it editorial assistant. So that was, I started there in 2005. I remember that because when I started Sky, the 2005 Ashes was going on, which that would be a big news in Ireland, wasn't it, Dara? The cricket?
No, cricket's not one of the big ones now.
That was big. That was big. That was really maybe the best cricket series ever. So I started there in 2005, and the job was edit little clips from interviews, write script for the auto cue. I was on the morning team, so we'd start at 3 a.m. On air at 6 a.m. Finish work at midday. Do 4 days on, 4 days off. Did that for a few years, and then Sky started doing a show called Football League Weekend, and they were I think they were pretty well looking for sort of new reporters, because Sky Sports News didn't want to lose any of their top reporters, and probably none of their top reporters would have wanted to do it, quite honestly. So I started doing that and had to do a feature, like to preview the game. We had a Friday show, and then we had to do a Monday show as well, which was obviously looking back at games. So you'd go to a club in the week, make a little feature, edit that together on a Friday, and then go to a game on a Saturday, edit that together on a Sunday or a Monday morning, and you do that. That was your week, really. And then I did that for a few years, started doing a few live games. My first live game was against Preston, Bristol City. And I thought I was just doing interviews, so I thought, okay, that'd be fine. I was quite nervous. But then it turned out to be, the game nearly got called off. It was so foggy. You could bet, I think the rule was, if they stand on the halfway line, can't see the goal, it'll get postponed. But they're right, Pat, we're going to have to come to you for like loads of live hits and stuff like that. I was like, oh no, please don't do that. And they didn't in the end. And you know, that might, if I'd have done that, I think I'd have been that bad that I'd have never done another game. But then, so I started doing live games for a bit. Remember like doing a few player finals, which is just about as good a game as you can go to. Blackpool beating Cardiff 3-2. Remember Swansea beating Reading 4-2. I think they were in consecutive years. They were brilliant games. And then started doing Premier League. My first season was just after the Aguero goal. So 2012, 2013, Man United won it. Sir Alex Ferguson's last season, my first season reporting. And then, you know, just been sort of clinging on by my fingernails ever since, really.
Do you nearly just need that, maybe just that lucky break in a job like media? Sometimes, even talking to Tom White, Sky Sports News, that you just maybe just need that break, and then it can just open up so many more opportunities.
Yeah, no, I've had so much luck because it was a mate who was already working at Sky who let me know of the job going at Sky Sports News. I don't know exactly how much of a leg up I got, but it definitely didn't hurt. And then so I don't know what would have happened now. So that show, Football League Weekend, doesn't exist anymore. And I didn't feel at the time, but I was able to probably make 2 features a week, go and do interviews, muck them up a lot of the time. Didn't really know how to voice a feature and stuff like that. Had to get a bit of training on how you voice things and using your voice. Not that I've got the best voice, but using it better than I did. And that show was such a good training ground because I was able to, like I say, do interviews, make mistakes, and no one knew who I was. There was no one on Twitter saying that guy's useless. Yeah. And I can't remember how many years I did it exactly, but it was 3 or 4 years, and I loved doing it. And I went to, I think I'm at about 72 grounds that I've been to now, but I was up near 80 for a bit. I went all over the country, did all sorts of games, and that show coming along at the right time. And it was sort of a little bit like, sorry, my kids are just charging around up there. But I was able to just have that show as a bit of a training ground. And that was really, one, it was a good job. I loved doing it. I loved getting around all the grounds and going to places that I've never been before. And I was able to do that under not that much pressure. So that was big. That was really big for me, actually, that show.
Yeah, and I suppose pre-lockdown, what would be the typical week? Would you just do the few interviews maybe for Super Sunday and that, and then would you have maybe typically 1 game a week, or would it be 2?
There's not really a typical week. Yeah, one or 2. I mean, sometimes 3. I've got, and I know you're saying pre-lockdown, but I think I've got 5 next week. It'd be just, if you've got less games, then there's just a bit more pressure to all the other stuff comes into it, like editing, travel, stuff like that. And sometimes you can pull together a feature that might take you sort of 3 or 4 weeks. I did one in 2018, 100 years since the First World War, and ended up making a feature about the 2 Manchester clubs and the guys from the 2 teams that fought in the war. And that took me like 6 weeks. So that was like a massive, all-consuming project. But then other weeks, it's obviously more typically, you might go up to Liverpool and do Salah, or Man City and do De Bruyne. So, I mean, I won't complain, Dara. It is sort of pretty good fun. I suppose, to answer your question properly, you might do like a Saturday game, then a Monday game, then you might be off. Tuesday might have off. Wednesday, probably going to the office, do a bit of prep. Sometimes you take a few props to the interview. I find that quite a nice way of sort of relaxing them sometimes. done a couple this season where try and find a few quotes, things that people have said about them. I actually did it with Andy Robertson in lockdown as well. It's just quite a nice way of making it not. Was it before the interview started, or just after? I said to you, like, the less it feels like an interview and the more relaxed they are, I think the better the chat you get. So yeah, I might spend Wednesday in the office doing a little something like that, preparing for the interview. Thursday, go and do it. Friday, edit, and then you're into your next week, which would start at the weekend really. Maybe you're off Saturday this time, then you might do a Super Sunday. So yeah, I don't know, maybe 1.5 is typical. So you might do Saturday and a Monday one week, and then do the Sunday the next week. But it does vary, and I like that, to be honest. It's not. There isn't really a typical week, and that's good.
Yeah, and then in terms of the interviews themselves, like what's the difference between the pre and then the post match? Would you, I suppose, you have to analyse the game yourself, nearly watching the game?
You do, because, and you see it a lot, like on social media. The conspiracy theories are, you get it sometimes. Sky, obviously that's their agenda. But it's as if we've all got together like a gang of supervillains in our cave planning what we're going to. But honestly, it's post-match is intense. It's really, especially when it's whoever the manager might be has got the hump, or it's a really big game. It happens really fast. You might have someone talking in your ear, like I always said. You could have the players come in, they do their interview, then maybe the losing player comes in. You can hear all sorts of different things in your ear. The producer has got to be talking to the pundits, so to Gary Neville, to Jamie Carragher, to Dave Jones and Kelly as well. The presenter-producer relationship is quite a strong one. They work together really closely. So as a reporter, you're kind of on your own. I mean, he might say, like, remember to ask Mourinho about VAR or something like that. Yeah. But honestly, the idea that you can sort of plan your questions out and all that, it doesn't happen. And actually, in my early days, I would try and write down as much as I can and look down. But you don't do as good an interview. You have to have the confidence to listen to people and sort of look them in the eye. And just, I tend to think, my first question, try and be pretty clear on what I'm going to do there. If I think the first question's going to elicit quite a short or quite an abrupt response, maybe think, okay, so I'm going to ask Mourinho this. Is he going to throw that back in my face? And if he throws it back in my face, I need to be ready for that. That's everyone's worst nightmare, isn't it? That you're going to dry up. Yeah. So, but you have to be ready for that. And I just maybe write down, so you maybe write down, right, okay, this is my first question, and then I need to ask him about the first goal, I need to ask him about VAR, I need to ask him why Dele Alli wasn't playing, and I need to ask him about, anything like that.
Yeah.
But then, so for example, the other Monday, Man City Burnley, obviously had no idea, all of a sudden the White Lives Matter banner, Burnley goes over the stadium, and I said to the club, we're asked, I think Sean Dyche should talk about it. So it wasn't like a choice for him. We felt he needed to be asked about that it was important. For the player, and I asked for Ben Mee, so I'll probably skip a step there. Every game has a match manager, and so 75, 80 minutes, all the negotiating starts, which can be a hard thing in itself because you start missing bits of the action. So on that occasion, I think it's an occasion for a captain, like a strong, confident speaker. And Ben Mee was given the option, really. I said, look, we'd like to ask him about this if he feels confident. Ben Mee then comes out of the tunnel like a man on a mission. He's like, I know, I think it's important. I want to talk about it. So great. So then he comes out and speaks absolutely brilliantly. And the reason I give that example is I probably, out of fairness to Ben, to not stitch him up after he's just lost 5-0, would have, if he'd have not wanted to answer a question on that, I wouldn't have asked it. Or my plan was to ask it last. But I asked him quite a generic question, and he went with it, and he spoke, I think it was 3 questions. And because of what he was talking about was so important and overshadowed the football, I didn't ask him any football. I didn't ask him anything that I had planned. And that's why it's important not to just have a list and work off it.
Yeah.
Because if he starts talking about how important Black Lives Matter is, and all of a sudden I say, Ben, second goal was your fault, or there was, I think you gave away a penalty. Do you know what I mean? It's just not right. That's why you have to not be stuck to a list, and you have to listen.
Well, that's exactly. You probably just have to let it flow and just adapt as it goes. But even Mourinho yesterday with the VAR, you just probably know, because nearly everyone knew that he probably going to do the usual. He doesn't want to talk about and prefer not to speak and all that. Like, how do you keep going with that? Do you just keep trying to nearly get something out of him?
So yeah, no, that was a bit of a balancing act. I actually thought it was a bit of a. I've been looking today to see if anyone pulled me up on it, and I don't think anyone has. But when I asked it, the question that actually got him talking was, "Have you spoken to the referee?" And I thought, why would you speak to the referee? It was a VAR. I thought, oh, he's going to destroy me here. But obviously, he never did, and actually, it sort of, I think it was quite a bad question, quite honestly, but it worked for me. Yeah, I did kind of know he was going to do that, and I probably took a bit of a risk. So the first question, I asked him about it straight away. And normally I probably would ease into it a little bit more, but I just felt I had enough. Once he said no, then I had enough else to ask him to sort of say, okay. So I went with what I felt was the story straight away. And sometimes with that, you just think, if you're at home, what do you want to know about? And I know people will sort of say, oh, slide, trying to get him in trouble, trying to get an answer. And it's not that. It's just, it's not trying to get him in trouble. It's just, I just think that's the story. That's what people want to hear. If I was at home, I'd want to hear his view on that decision. So, yeah, what was the plan? The plan was, I knew it would probably take more than one question. I didn't think he would just come and sing like a canary. So it's just a case of, although I said that referee question was a bad one, it was just a case of trying to keep him on topic without obviously asking the same question again and again. Think of a few different ways to maybe get him on, and hopefully one of them would get him, because he does really want to talk about it. I know he says he doesn't, but he does want to. He has got something he wants to say there. So it's just, I don't think I'd have done my job if I'd have just said, if he'd have said, look, I don't want to talk about it. If I'd have just said, oh, well, okay, what do you think of the game? No, I don't think that would have been good reporting, really. So the plan was go for it straight away, get him onto it, and keep him on that topic until he said something, which he did in the end. So, yeah, I suppose I got away with it.
Yeah, do you think actually VAR has actually made your job a bit harder as well? That you have a lot more frustrated managers. Like every weekend, you see managers now nearly frustrated and questioning VAR. That could take up the whole interview itself nearly nowadays.
Yeah, and I do worry that it does take up too many, and it's sort of like you get bored with your own questions. You're like, why are we talking about this again? But then, just thinking of obviously last night. You can't ask about that. The last time I was at Sheffield United was the Declan Rice. Do you remember that, where he got a handball and he put Snodgrass in for a late equaliser? And you just Declan Rice came and did an interview after that game, and it was absolutely brilliant, actually. So sometimes you can't avoid it. I do worry that it takes up too much of our time. And I actually don't think last night it was really a VAR thing. That handball rule is terrible. It's terrible. So yes, I do worry that I asked too many questions about it. But I think often it's hard to avoid. It's hard to avoid, I think.
Yeah, well, that's exactly it. I suppose you probably just a few interviews I remember you doing. I suppose the first one would have been the Van Gaal one away at Stoke.
What is the truth then? Are the people that matter still behind you? It's another situation. We have lost the fourth game, so you have to wait and see. Thanks for your time.
They just lost 2-0 to Stoke, and it was mounting pressure on him. And I don't know what you said to maybe the last question, and he answered it. And as he was walking away, he just gave this death stare to you. What were you thinking when he just gave that 2-3 second stare?
sometimes in my nightmares, I feel like he's still staring at me. He, you know what? I could see that. I feel this is maybe a little bit of hindsight, but I could see that interview coming about a month before. We got our rotas, and Man United were all over the place. Like you say, the pressure was mounting. It was Boxing Day, and normally you sort of, when you get your rota, you're hoping you've got big games. You're hoping, in a way, that you've got difficult interviews because it's just a chance to do your job well. But I don't know, on Boxing Day, you're a little bit like, I just could do with a nice, quiet, a little bit of Maurizio Pochettino, maybe. He's like, so come in, little hug. How are you? How are your family? Oh, they're great, Maurizio. How are you? Going, just a nice day, everyone to be happy. But I remember that day, you're talking about Van Gaal, we met. I met my producer at Beaconsfield Services at about 7 a.m. It was an early kickoff. So it was on my head, in my mind, a lot of Christmas Day. And then we got there. And then I'm not sure how quickly Stoke went 2-0 up, but I think both their goals were pretty early.
First half, I think, yeah.
But it was one of them where it felt like almost within 2 or 3 minutes, you're like, oh no, this is happening today, because Stoke were fantastic. Man United were nowhere near it. And then it got to post-match, and all the other interviews sort of took care of themselves, which is often the case, to be honest. You often find that you've got one. Okay, this is, say like Mourinho at Sheffield United, you think, okay, I can muck up all the rest of them. If I do Mourinho well, people will think I've done okay today. And vice versa. If I do all the other interviews well but fluff Mourinho, then people will think I've done badly. So suddenly it's like Stoke, there's a long corridor, and then there's a corner. And the away dressing was right around the corner. So it was actually about, I think we had sort of 2 or 3 minutes left on air, and the producers came through, and we have a guy called a floor manager there. Like the grumpy guys that you often see, sort of, they're just standing in the corner of managers' shots. They're the floor managers. So he's getting a lot of pressure from our producer. Where's Van Gaal? Where's Van Gaal? We've got to get Van Gaal in the show. He hasn't come. And then all of a sudden, here the guy, Brett Smart, his name is, he's a manager on his way. And they said, right, Pat, live interview. So, I was trying to avoid swearing. I was nervous. Because I knew he was really under pressure for his job then. So I knew I'd have to ask it. So you can't ask at the start. So you sort of go through the motions of the game. And then you get to the point. And you're hoping to ask them the question sort of fairly. But also to sound, you just want to be composed and not sort of not wilt, basically, under the pressure. So yeah, asked him a couple of questions about what would happen next, about his future, and then the stare follows that. After I say thanks for your time or whatever it was, he's walking out a shot and just like looking at me as he's going, and And then I did him. Was it the same season, or because he survived that, didn't he?
He did. He won the FA Cup, yeah.
And then I can't even remember what game it was, but I had another famous Van Gaal. Do you remember him talking about sex masochism? Remember that?
Yeah. I don't know what game. Yeah, I do actually remember that. Yeah.
It was my hair he started pulling as an example. So that was a bit weird. But Man United is actually, Old Trafford's a really loud tunnel, especially in the crowd, because you can hear the crowd going out past the metal gates. And some of them are sort of like almost like offices where the interviews happen. Old Trafford is like a real football tunnel, which is great a lot of the time, but it's quite hard to hear. And I'm just thinking, what did he really just say that? And like a few people said, "Oh, you did well to like keep composure." And the truth was, it was just luck, because I hadn't heard what he said. And I just raced back to the truck at the end and see, did he say that? Did he say what I thought he said? Yeah. That turns out he did. Yeah.
Yeah, he came out with a few things that season. I think even just before that, he was on about enjoying. So he walked out of a press conference maybe a week before that Stoke game. It's like enjoy the mince pies and all that, or something.
Yeah,
like
that's
right. It was just building, and you just happened to get him that day.
Yeah, exactly. It's luck of the draw. I'd say. You're right. Sorry, my wife wants a handbag. There you go, love. Yeah, and I don't think it's not bad to get interviews like that. It's a real sort of adrenaline rush. You don't, like I say, you want to be seen to be doing them fairly and not relish too much, because they are under. I mean, blimey, Louis van Gaal, manager of Man United, Jurgen Klopp, we've seen it a couple of times. They're under massive pressure. They've got huge jobs, and can you imagine? You've just lost the game, and you've just got to go out and do an interview. And sometimes they have. I remember the guys at Liverpool saying that after Champions League night, sometimes Klopp's got like 17 interviews to do. So I think people can read into say, a manager, whoever it might be, shown his true colours, and that's not true. I think as a reporter, don't never take it personally. They're under a lot of pressure. They've just lost a game, and the last thing they want is you having a microphone in their nose, not in their nose, whatever. And especially if you're going to ask stuff about their future. And sometimes I think it's fair to ask sometimes if that's a story and that could happen. But I think if someone snaps at you, take it in your stride. Don't take it personally.
Yeah, another one would be the Klopp one against Everton. Obviously, Lovren had just given away the penalty late on. I think it was just a little bit of a push. Klopp obviously is stubborn. He's not going to think it is, and he was nearly asking you what you thought, and you thought you said it was whatever soft, but it was a penalty, and he just did the laugh or something. And what are you thinking? That was just one of those strange interviews that he was nearly asking you rather than the other way around.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, what I remember of that is he came out really quickly. We did, the players were Everton players, obviously they were happier with the result. We did Rooney, who scored the penalty, didn't he? I think we did John Joe Kenny from memory. And then again, you got that sort of on the mic, manager on his way. And I honestly expect it, because normally, it's not a set rule, but normally the winning manager will come first because he's all happy, and the losing manager might take a little bit longer. So it's literally like as Rooney and John Joe walk out of the booth, Klopp is right there. So I reckon that interview happened within 5 minutes, definitely within 5 minutes of the game finishing. So he was slightly, fuming. He's really, if he'd have come maybe 5 minutes later, the interview might have gone a bit differently. And then there were just, do you remember, he'd rested a lot of his big players, hadn't he? I think he took Salah off.
Yeah, I think he played Slanky on that one as well. Yeah.
What was the thing? Where did it go downhill, that one? Oh, it was on the penalty, wasn't it? It was on the penalty where he started.
Yeah, they missed a few chances in the first half, I think, and he took Salah off, and obviously Lovren gave the little push then, and Calvert-Lewin.
But I don't remember, what question was it? Have you watched it back before this?
I think Sky actually put up in the last week. I think he's like asking, do you think it's a penalty or something like that? And you were saying the punt is Stu, and he said, what do you think? And then he said, what do you think? You said it was soft, but the penalty, and he just he did the laugh and or something.
Yeah, I only want to talk to people who know anything about football, something like that.
Yeah.
But I think I'm right in saying that I said my opinion didn't matter which. I'd always try and say something like that. I'd always try and avoid. But then I think, again, I'm only going off memory, but I think he pushed me a little bit on it. And I think, well, in the end, you just seem like you're bottling a little bit if you don't answer that. So probably actually looking back at it, I'm not sure it was a penalty, because what I hadn't seen at the time, again, that happened quite late in the game. And I hadn't really probably fully appreciated how much Calvert-Lewin sort of steps in and buys the penalty. But yeah, so I certainly at that point thought it was a bit clumsy from Lovren, wasn't it? So I said that, and he wasn't that happy. And then, but I still had some quite. I still felt like I had to ask him about the changes he'd made from Merseyside derby, the players he'd taken off. But one thing I'd say with the club is I just think he doesn't plan interviews. I don't think. I've heard him say that before, and I do believe him. It's what's so great about him. 99% of the time, he says what he's thinking, and if he's annoyed, if he's in a bad mood, he doesn't try and gloss it over. So it's not. I actually did Liverpool again the next week at Bournemouth, and he was absolutely fine with me pre-match. So fairness to Liverpool and to Klopp, there was no sort of hangover from that. It didn't cause a problem. Like, we're not best mates. I don't think he even knows who I am, quite honestly. But he's absolutely fine. He next time he saw me, there was no sort of bad vibes or anything like that. So it just moved on. It's just, and I say, it was a memorable interview, wasn't it? And like so many of the ones he does, basically he's authentic. So when he's in a bad mood, that's what you get. When he's in a good mood, that's what you get. You don't get media trained sort of bland answers. You get the real man. So, and it's great because I think you see a little bit of why he's so able to inspire a group of players. So yeah, but that's my main thing from that, because I can remember turning up from the Bournemouth game the next week thinking, oh, this is going to be just frosty. And you always expect maybe one interview to be bad or to be tough with the losing manager. But I'm thinking, I've got to do Klopp pre-match. He's going to be disappointed to see my face. So even then probably post-match he's going to be. Then Liverpool probably win, so the Bournemouth manager's going to have the hump as well. So basically every interview I'm doing today is going to be with someone who's angry with me. But in fairness to him, he wasn't at all. He was absolutely brilliant. So I'd go back to what I said earlier, where always try and be understanding of a manager who's disappointed when he's either lost or, as in that Liverpool-Everton game, it hasn't gone their way.
Yeah, I mean, one other funny one, it wasn't even an interview, was I'm sure you've seen it so many times, the American from Wakefield one where you're at Huddersfield. Yeah, and was it Jan Seaworth is going to take over as manager?
Wish it had been Jan Seaworth.
Yeah. Now, in your defence, he actually did look very like him, but were you told that there was a possibility, or was there a cameraman that picked him out in the stand?
Cameraman found him first, yeah. Do you know whose fault it was, Dara? Gary Neville's.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Yeah. There is actually a clip somewhere out there of him admitting this. He did a thing with Jeff Shreves where he said, so that was Huddersfield Man City, and it was, I think by the time I went up there, it was 3-0, and it was a very one-sided Premier League match.
Yeah.
So they were like, I'd said to Huddersfield before, will Seaworth be there? No, he's not going to be there. And the club had been sort of pretty clear on that. And then at one point in the first half, someone keys me like, Patrick, are you sure he's not here? Because we think we've got him on the camera. I said, no, the club had told me he's not here. But he's in the stand where I'm sitting. So I look up. I was like, no, it's not him. Initially, I really didn't think, because I'd have to see it back. But if you look who the guy turns out to be Martin is sat with, it's not like a manager with his coaching staff. I think like he's sat next to quite an old lady. Just people with him clearly aren't football people. So, but as it goes on, they're chipping away, and like I say, Gary will back me up on this. He is relentless saying it's him. So in the end, it's 3-0. I think it's not one of them games where you feel like I can't miss a second here. So I was all right. I'm going to go up and I'm just going to ask him, because for me at that point, I'm thinking, obviously very wrongly, the worst thing that can happen is someone phones me up when I'm driving back from the game and says, Pat, he was there. And part of my job is to be across what's happening in the game. It's not just the interviews. So I thought, worst case scenario is it is him and I haven't spotted it, or I've given the production wrong information. So I go up there and just thought I'll ask him. But I also didn't know they were going to film me. So I thought, potentially 5 to 10 people, or I don't know how many, who heard me ask him, within the vicinity, are going to think this guy's an idiot. He doesn't know what sort of reporter doesn't know a Premier League football manager. But as it turned out, it got broadcast to the world. And even that night, I was like, oh, that's embarrassing. I wish I hadn't done that. I wish I hadn't done it, and I wish I hadn't been shown. But I didn't probably realise what a big deal it was. But I had really so weird. The next day I woke up. I think my missus had done school run and everything because I'd got back quite late, and I sort of had loads of missed calls, and people had been trying to get me on TalkSport, which I'm very rarely in any demand at all. And then I had like a little 5-minute period where I turned on my iPad, and it was like I think it was the top story on BBC News on like my app. It was on it felt like every channel I turned on, I saw this guy. I almost felt like I was in a dream. I was like, how is this? Why is this such a big story? But life goes on, Dara.
Yeah, I think they even used Martin in the manager reveal. I think that week I think he was sitting down or something, answering a phone or something in the office.
Yeah, they did. Yeah. And actually, they got obviously they had Jan Sievert and Martin in the same room, and that guy Martin, he was like a charity organizer. He was huge. He was so much bigger than Jan Sievert. So I think it made me look even more stupid, if that was possible, because they had them next to each other, and like Martin's got at least a foot on him, so that didn't look great. But I don't know. I'm making excuses now. I'm forcing it onto Gary Neville, but I'm happy to admit. Obviously, I look like a bit of a wally, and I probably should have done better. But there you go. I do see the funny side of it. It's not something I mind talking about or anything like that.
And that's just, you can sort of look back and laugh at it. It wasn't that big of a deal, really, in some ways.
No, it wasn't. It wasn't a big deal at all. The club thought it was funny. I think Jan Sievert found it funny when he came in. Honestly, like Gary Neville called me straight afterwards, and he's like, he's brilliant, Gary. I think he's just like a great pundit. I enjoy working with him, but he's quite like a lot of phone calls. You'll speak to him about something, and he's hung up before you even finish speaking. He's very, very driven and hungry, and there's no room for any fat. He doesn't do small talk. He is totally relentless. But he called me after this game, and he's like, I couldn't hear him speak. You could tell just from the sound of his voice, he was in tears. And I think even to this day, he says he's his best day at Sky. He absolutely enjoyed my downfall so much. Yeah, he called me as I was I think Laura Woods was there as well. I was dropping her at the train station. He called me just as I stopped, and it was one of the happiest days of his life, he says. So that's nice.
Yeah, just a tiny bit about you. Obviously, did a bit with the Republic of Ireland. Probably during the Martin O'Neill, Roy Keane era. What was that like? You nearly feel a part of the camp in some ways, that you're following the team around wherever they go.
Yeah, no, it was amazing. I'm not sure how many Trapattoni games I did. I remember the first time I went to Dublin for work. I sort of flew in that day, and more or less the first thing I had to go to was a Trapattoni press conference, and that was quite something, just because of the very unique way that he spoke the language. I was like, well, what is he talking about? So that he was really like an eccentric and like interesting man. So that was quite an experience straight away, one of his press conferences. And then I think they got hammered by Germany 6-1. Certainly very early, the sort of me starting covering Ireland, the writing was on the wall for Trapattoni. And then O'Neill and Keane started, and that was great actually. I'm not sure you'd know better than me, that I'm not sure that they're that fondly remembered. What would you say?
No, I agree with that. I think it just went. Obviously, Euro 2016 was brilliant, but it just went sour very quickly. I think it was just the style of football, and you're right saying I don't think they remember probably that fondly for we got out of the group in the Euros and almost qualified for the World Cup. But I think it's just that Denmark game, just everything. We weren't playing great football. We were getting results, and it just all landed that night nearly.
Yeah, that's so true. If you take their reign up to when they went 1-0 up against Denmark, I don't think you could have done any better.
Yeah.
I think there is actually, I think there's a difference in terms of, obviously I was reporting for Sky and a little bit to a UK audience. There's a definitely different perception in Britain to what there is in Ireland, because I think obviously if you're Irish, you're going to be watching the football, and like the style and the standard of play obviously annoys you a little bit more. But if you're looking over you get back to, I live just outside London, people are like, what are people complaining about? And you think, they've got a draw and a win against Germany, the Italy night, and the other really good away results. I remember 2 Serbia, obviously knocked Bosnia out to get to the Euros. They had loads of good results, really, with like a group that was probably more than the sum of its parts. I'm not sure there was the players there to play liquid football there, quite honestly. But they did. If you think from the 6-1 against Germany, that night when Shane Long got, that was such a good night. I had so many like brilliant nights. I remember when O'Shea equalised in Germany. That was right in the last minute as well, when everyone hung in and all the. I'd probably have a slightly different view of. I probably would take the English view a little bit of how O'Neill and Keane did, because I just think I'm not sure the players were there to sort of rip teams to bits. And from memory, Ireland had a spell where they hadn't been beating teams ranked above them. That kind of giant killing thing they'd had for a few years had gone away. Like under Trapattoni, they beat teams they should beat, but they didn't really turn up. I'm saying that. I'm now remembering a goal where Keith Andrews scored again, and they beat Italy away, didn't they? So I might be wrong about that. But I just there was definitely. Is that right? Oh, maybe it's in a competitive game then. Maybe that's what it was. But there was definitely there was enough. There was enough good nights under O'Neill and Keane. But I'd agree with you as well. From that Denmark night on, that was horrible. That they started chasing it, didn't they? They went 2-1 down. That was quite a tricky one actually, because I think I remember asking Martin O'Neill about had he got it wrong and stuff like that, and I felt he was one. I think he took it quite personally. Actually, he felt like there was trust between you, and I could see like from how he was afterwards and stuff. He sort of felt a bit sort of stabbed in the back by me. So that wasn't nice. And obviously, I was gutted as well, because I'd have got to go to a World Cup and cover Ireland at a World Cup if they'd have won that night. So there was some personal disappointment as well.
Yeah, I think just lastly on O'Neill, what was he like to interview? Because I don't know, did you know, I think obviously Tony O'Donoghue was the RTE interviewer. Now they seem to have sort of a tetchy enough relation. You just knew that there was always going to be something. Now maybe it was just Tony's line of question or Martin, I don't know. Did you get the same sort of vibe off him?
Well, it's different, because obviously Tony's working for, I mean, he's doing it for an Irish audience, and he's also like RTE punditry is also quite combative, isn't it?
Yeah.
So the guys up in the studio would be sort of hammering the team.
Yeah.
And I'd do a similar thing to. I really like I said to you, Tony was absolutely brilliant with me when I came over, and I wondered, especially as like a newcomer, almost a little bit of competition. I wondered whether, being English, this is my own ignorance, I wonder whether people would be a bit sort of hostile towards me. But from the fans to Tony to the players, like everyone was so good with me, and I just think Tony had to. You have to do an interview that sort of reflect that. I'll always try and listen to our pundits and our studio guys and try and not sort of. You're almost sort of nicking their ideas a little bit, but you want to do an interview that fits into your show a little bit. So try and use their knowledge. Try and do, if Gary Neville's gone off on one talking about the left back or whatever, maybe ask a question about it. And so I think that's what it was that probably Martin couldn't see, that Tony had. For Tony to do his job properly, you can't have. Who would it normally be in the studio? I'm trying to think now.
Or RTE.
Yeah, who they normally have in? Johnny Giles.
Eamon Dunphy at the time would be sort of the big one.
Yeah. So you can't have, and also Eamon Dunphy would call on air, would batter Tony's questions if he didn't think Tony had been sufficiently strong. So you can't have Eamon Dunphy clattering into O'Neill in the studio, and then so that does put a bit of pressure on Tony. So, but basically, it was a bit of a different vibe. It was much easier for me to not go into battle with Martin O'Neill, because there wasn't as much. Sky are doing Ireland, but they'll do like those Nations League games. You've got like a pod, so you have the Wales game, the Scotland game, maybe England highlights a little bit later. So, and I do think it's not. Look, you might call it bottling it a little bit, but there's no. I always think if you don't have to go to war with a manager, like, and it's a sort of job where problems will find you. You're going to have, like, Van Gaal's a good example. Klopp. I don't think it was that avoidable for me to have fairly confrontational interviews. But when you can avoid them, if you don't need to ask things, sometimes don't. So I just think there was more pressure on Tony to ask pressing questions than there was on me. Because, like I say, and that comes down again to the sort of how that team was perceived. I think on our side of the Irish Sea, it was like they've done quite well. On your side, it was a little bit like the football's terrible. So you have to reflect. It's always a really good thing if you're sort of scrambling, say like there's been a late goal in a game and you think, I've got to rip up everything I've thought of. Try and think what someone at home would want to ask, and just, it's a really nice way of simplifying it for yourself. And if I do that and Tony does that, then we've probably got different questions because we're doing it. No one Irish, no one in Dublin or whatever is listening to my interview. They're all listening to Tony's. So do you know what I mean? It's different. It's the same job, but a different, totally different market and audience.
Yeah, I suppose to finish up, what would be sort of the best thing working for Sky Sports? Is it just going to the games and watching football? That you probably just love watching games the whole time as well?
Yeah, I'd say so. The island thing, since we're on it, is pretty high up because my kids were really young at the time, really like babies. So I got to go off to Dublin for a week. One of the guys become like a really good friend, cameraman called Jason. I'll give him a little name check. Him and I used to love meeting up with him. I'd be in Dublin for a week, and then I'd go to, I went to Moldova and Bosnia and Serbia and France for the Euros, Austria, Germany, and loads of those places, like going to Chisinau, the capital of Moldova. You'd never go there. Yeah. Sarajevo, Bosnia. It's just like, I love that. I love travelling with Ireland, and I've done, in the Nations League, I've done a few England games. Went to Seville. I went to Croatia with England, so that's pretty cool as well. And then, it's just some of the games, especially early years of the Premier League. I remember doing Sunderland Newcastle was just an unbelievable game for atmosphere. I remember just taking my cans off and just really just sort of sucking it up, just listening to the crowd. First Merseyside derby, some of the games. I mean, I can remember, didn't feel that great at the time, but I didn't think it's doing many times, but interviewing Sir Alex Ferguson for the first time. I'm pleased that I got to do that. He was he didn't even make eye contact. He did a reverse Van Gaal on me. The floor manager said, this is Sir Alex walking along, manager on his way, and he says, John Smart, the floor manager, says, Gaffer, this is Patrick, new reporter. Nothing, didn't say hello, didn't look at me, and then as I started speaking, he looked up, and I've never listened back to that interview, but I know that I was a bit like, not a good question. It was very stuttery. It was I mean, I got through it, but that was quite an interesting insight as well, because I just think from new reporters like me to referees and stuff like that, he had he was across every last bit of detail. Do you know what I mean? That was definitely, I'm convinced, a message. You'll be fine with me as long as you toe the line. And he sort of, his presence, he forced his presence onto everyone, which was, I think, just a tiny little bit of what made him a great manager.
Yeah, so I think we'll just wrap it up there, Patrick. Thanks very much for coming on. It was a honest hour or so, whatever it was.
No worries, pal. No worries. Thanks for having me on.